So, why does this matter? If we have experienced an unprecedented political trauma, we should be prepared to act to prevent any recurrence. Nixon's fall introduced an era of government reform, expanded privacy rights, overhauled campaign finance rules, presidential records preservation, and enhanced congressional oversight of covert ops. Managing the pandemic must be the incoming Biden administration's principal focus, but it needn't be its only focus. Steps can be taken to ensure that the worst president ever is held to account, and to forestall a man like Trump ever abusing his power in this way again. The first is to ensure that we preserve the record of what has taken place. As was done after the Nixon administration, Congress should pass a law establishing guidelines for the preservation of and access to the materials of the Trump presidents. Those guidelines should also protect nonpartisan public history at any public facility associated with the Trump era. The Presidential Records Act already puts those documents under the control of the Archivist of the United States, but Congress should mandate that they be held in the D.C. area and that the National Archives should not partner with the Trump Foundation in any public history efforts. Disentangling the federal Nixon Presidential Library from Nixon's poisonous myths about Watergate took an enormous effort. The pressure on the National Archives to, in some way, enable and legitimate Trump's own lost cause is likely to be even greater. Trump's documented relationship with the truth also ensures that his presidential records will necessarily be incomplete. His presidency has revealed gaping loopholes in the process of public disclosure, which the president deftly exploited. Congress should mandate that future candidates and presidents release their tax returns. Congress should also seek to tightly constrict the definition of privacy regarding presidential medical records. It should also require presidents to fully disclose their own business activities, and those of members of their immediate family, conducted while in office. Congress should also claim, as public records, the transition materials of 2016-17 and 2020-21 and those of future transitions. Finally, Congress must tend to American memory. It should establish a joint congressional committee to study January 6 and the events and activities leading up to it, have public hearings, and issue a report. And it should bar the naming of federal buildings, installations, and vessels after Trump. His presidency should be remembered, but not commemorated, because this, ultimately, is the point of this entire exercise. If Trump is now the worst president we have ever had, it's up to every American to ensure that no future chief executive ever exceeds him. Trump's sons insist Papa Bear is conflict of interest proof. February 13, 2017. Some people might have been uncomfortable with the sight of the President of the United States hosting the Prime Minister of another country at his for-profit Palm Beach resort, as Trump did the second weekend in February 2017, but the president's big boy adult. To the New York Times, Eric Trump dismissed the question of whether or not Trump charged Japan for Shinzo Abe to stay at Mar-a-Lago when the White House would have been free as meaningless, while an incensed Don, practically shrieking, flew off the handle when asked about the prospect that his father was using the presidency to line the Trump family's pockets. Who in their right mind would try to enrich themselves by spending a fortune to run against 17 seasoned politicians on the Republican side, to then go up against the Clinton machine, Wall Street, Hollywood, PC culture? Don Jr. asked. To use that as the way to enrich yourself is laughable. This would be several years before we learn Mar-a-Lago charged taxpayers for the glasses of water Trump drank while at the club. Trump was set to kill NAFTA until an advisor showed him a map. April 28, 2017. He still ended up killing NAFTA, but he briefly kept it going after his agriculture secretary brought along a prop to the Oval Office displaying the parts of the country that would be hardest hit by the move and highlighting that many of them had voted. It shows that I do have a very big farmer base, which is good, Trump told the Washington Post. They like Trump, but I like them, and I'm going to help them. He would end up F-king them in other ways. Trump thinks he invented a phrase that's been used since 1932. May 11, 2017. It was on this day in history that we learned the 45th president claimed to have invented the phrase "prime the pump." Trump drops the mic on trainwreck NATO meeting by calling Germans very evil. May 25, 2017. During his first big trip abroad, and his first NATO meeting, Trump shamelessly shoved Montenegro's prime minister out of the way so he could be front and center for a group photo, accused fellow members of the alliance of not paying their bills, and proclaimed the Germans are evil. It is truly a wonder that when he lost his bid for re-election, other countries celebrated like we defeated the mothership in Independence Day. Trump tells local Iowans why he prefers the rich. June 22, 2017. During a campaign-style rally in Cedar Falls, Iowa, to discuss agriculture and vocational training for farmers, Trump decided to get frank about his decision to exclusively fill his cabinet with cartoonishly. Somebody said, "Why did you appoint a rich person to be in charge of the economy?" He told the crowd. And he explained, "Because that's the kind of thinking we want. I love all people, rich or poor. But in those particular positions, I just don't want a poor person." Does that make sense? His presidency in crisis, Trump takes a break to play fireman. July 17, 2017. Things were not going so well for Trump on this July day in 2017. Questions surrounding his campaign's attempt to team up with the Russian government during the 2016 election had reached a fever pitch, but there was one bright spot in his world: the White House's Made in America Week, which gave the leader of the free world the opportunity to pretend to be a cowboy, a baseball. This experience came only second to the time he got to sit in a big rig and pretend to be a truck driver. Trump goes on unhinged rant in front of thousands of children. July 25, 2017. In late July 2017, Trump treated tens of thousands of Boy Scouts to a 35-minute campaign rally-style screed that touched on everything from killing Obamacare to musing about firing a member. He also hyped up the stock market and went on an extended aside about all the really hot parties he was invited to in the 1980s. He later claimed that the head of the Boy Scouts called him to say it was the greatest speech that was ever made, a call that a spokesperson for the group said never happened. Trump manages to say another cringeworthy thing about Charlottesville. September 14, 2017. Maybe you thought it couldn't get much worse than refusing to condemn neo-Nazis and claiming there were very fine people on both sides. Then Trump made up a story about a lot of people saying, "Gee, Trump might have had a point." Trump tells Puerto Ricans their hurricane wasn't a real catastrophe like Katrina. October 3, 2017. After saying nothing about the humanitarian disaster wrought by Hurricane Maria for days, only to attack the mayor of San Juan via Twitter, the president made it down to Puerto. There, he complained that the territory, which had been without electricity and water for days, was costing him a lot of money. Later, he said that Maria wasn't a real catastrophe like Katrina and then tossed paper towels into the crowd like it was Friday night at Madison Square Garden and he was shooting t-shirts into the stands with an air cannon. The following September, he claimed the 3,000-person death count was a Democratic hoax to make him look bad. Trump gives himself a 10 out of 10 on Puerto Rico recovery. October 19, 2017. Yes, he did. At the time 28% of residents didn't have potable water and 78% of the island did. Trump can't believe no one's thrown a parade in his honor. December 20, 2017. Can you? Honestly, with everything he'd done for the country, this was the thanks he got? In this particular instance, Trump was reportedly ranting and raving that his tax bill, the one that slashed the corporate rate and effectively did jack shit for the middle class, wasn't being touted as the biggest accomplishment of any president in the history. Where were the monuments in his honor? Where were the ticker tape parades? In the end, Trump's tax cuts resulted in, drumroll please, 1-cent bonuses for work. But did anyone send him a personal thank you letter or petition to have the Lincoln Memorial replaced with a statue of Trump based on this? No. Trump is the least racist person ever, insists his shortest tenured employee. January 12, 2018. Anthony Scaramucci, late of being fired from the White House after 11 days, made this claim after Trump reportedly asked advisors why he had to let immigrants from shithole countries in Africa and Haiti come to us. At POTUS is not a racist, the mooch tweeted. He is far from it. Perhaps the least racist. But of course, he was and is racist, and we know this because of all the racist stuff he'd done previously, like allegedly claiming that 15,000 Haitians who had obtained visas to live in the U.S., all have AIDS, and that 40,000 Nigerian visa holders would never go back to their huts. Kicking off his candidacy for president by calling Mexicans drug dealers, rapists, and criminals. Calling white supremacists, neo-Nazis, and members of the KKK some very fine people. Asking a black reporter to set up a meeting with the Congressional Black Caucus, because he apparently thinks all black people are friends. Describing minority communities as ghettos where gangs roam the streets. Calling for the execution of the 5 black, wrongfully accused teenagers. Spending a good portion of executive time targeting black athletes and retweeting anti-Muslim hate videos from white nationalist accounts. Spending half a decade spreading a conspiracy theory that America's first black president was not born in the United States. Legendary legal mind Rudy Giuliani comes out of semi-retirement to save Donald Trump. April 19, 2018. With Robert Mueller's investigation into possible collusion between Trump's campaign and Russia kicking into high gear, and Trump losing attorneys by the hour, the president decided his best bet was to contract the legal services of the former mayor of New York. It did not go well. Trump's prayer day benediction, paying off porn stars totally normal for people of wealth. May 3, 2018. On the National Day of Prayer, a day of observance designated by Congress when people are asked to turn to God in prayer and meditation, Trump took to Twitter to explain that while it may have looked bad that his personal attorney paid off porn star Stormy Daniels to keep quiet about an alleged affair he swore never happened, it was actually pretty standard for people in his Mr. Cohen, an attorney, received a monthly retainer, not from the campaign and having nothing to do with the campaign, from which he entered into, through reimbursement, a private contract between two parties, known as a non-disclosure agreement, or NDA, the President of the United States. These agreements are very common among celebrities and people of wealth. In this case, it is in full force and effect and will be used in arbitration for damages against him. Clifford Daniels. The agreement was used to stop the false and extortionist accusations made by her about an affair, despite already having signed a detailed letter admitting that there was no affair. Prior to its violation by Ms. Clifford and her attorney, this was a private agreement. Money from the campaign, or campaign contributions, played no role, in this transaction. Trump's limo driver of 25 years confirms he's an unrepentant asshole. July 9, 2018. All of America now knows what it's like to be Trump's chauffeur. The White House threatened to economically cripple Ecuador for promoting breastfeeding. July 9, 2018. What the fuck was this, which you might have missed among all the other corruption and batshittery from Team Trump, about? Oh, nothing. The Trump administration just didn't want to upset Big Formula, and flew off the handle over an anodyne resolution introduced by Ecuador encouraging breastfeeding, having in bracket, the interests of infant. After Ecuador wouldn't comply with the US's demand that language asking governments to restrict the promotion of food products that many experts say can have deleterious effects on young children be removed, as officials reportedly threatened to unleash punishing trade measures and withdraw crucial military aid. Ultimately, Russia stepped in to introduce the measure, and, naturally, was not threatened with sanctions. Trump casually suggests he could blackmail a U.S. senator but will save it for his next book. October 1, 2018. During a press conference in the Rose Garden, the topic of Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh came up. Asked if he would empower the FBI to widen its investigation into allegations against the judge, Trump initially responded that the FBI should interview anybody that they want within Then he added that if Kavanaugh was really guilty, the accusations would have come up years ago and it's really unfair that people were going back to high school and, saying he drank a lot one evening. They actually said he spent most of high school and college blackout drunk and engaged in. Then the president told the press he had much worse dirt on an unnamed Democratic congressman that he'd maybe have to air if Democrats didn't lay off his nominee. I happen to know some United States senators, Trump said, one who is on the other side, who is pretty aggressive. I've seen that person in very bad situations. Okay? I've seen that person in very, very bad situations. Somewhat compromising. And I think it's very unfair to bring up things like this. Asked who this senator was, the leader of the free world responded, I think I'll save it for a book like everybody else. Trump endorses violent assault against reporters. October 19, 2018. Trump, I don't condone violence. Also Trump's new AG worked for scam firm that threatened victims with Krav Maga style beatdown. November 8, 2018. After Trump shoved Jeff Sessions out the door for recusing himself from the Russia probe, Trump appointed an interim attorney general named Matthew. Continuing in Trump's grand tradition of only hiring the best people, Whitaker's previous work experience included serving on the advisory board of a company called World Patent Marketing, which bilked inventors out of millions they believed were going toward patents and licensing deals and was shut down by the federal. Perhaps more importantly, WPM, for which Whitaker also appeared in promotional videos and photos, Cultivate D, a threatening atmosphere in which customers were sent emails warning them that they would be visited by a security team of ex-Israeli special ops, trained in Krav Maga, one of the most deadly of the martial arts, comprised of the kind of guys who are trained to knock out. And one of the products the company marketed was a masculine toilet, which was specially designed for well-endowed men hoping to avoid unwanted contact with porcelain or water. WPM, which reportedly paid Whitaker $9,375 in advisory fees between 2014 and 2016 and owed him $7,500 more at the time the FTC got involved, said in its marketing material that the average male genitalia is between. However, this invention is designed for those of us who measure longer than that. President Bone Spurs thinks he would have caught bin Laden faster than Navy SEALs. November 19, 2018. On November 19, 2018, after attacking retired Admiral William H. McRaven, who oversaw the capture of Saddam Hussein and the killing of Osama bin Laden during his near 40 years in the U.S. military, Trump had this exchange with Fox's Chris Wallace. Trump, wouldn't it have been nice if we got Osama bin Laden a lot sooner than that? Wouldn't it have been nice? Think of this, living in Pakistan, beautifully in Pakistan and what I guess they considered a nice mansion, I don't know. But living in Pakistan right next to the military academy, everybody in Pakistan knew he was there. Wallace, you're not even going to give them credit for taking down bin Laden? Trump, they took him down but, look, there's news right there, he lived in Pakistan, we're supporting Pakistan, we're giving them $3 billion a year, which we don't give them anymore. By the way, I ended it because they don't do anything for us, they don't do a damn thing for us. Trump to America, aren't you glad we let the Saudis kill that guy? November 21, 2018. Days after the CIA concluded that Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman had ordered the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, Trump tweeted that it was totally worth letting the guy get away with it because of the cheap oil prices we got in return. Trump, I'm thankful for myself. November 23, 2018. The day after Thanksgiving 2018, Trump was asked by reporters what he was thankful for that year, to which he responded, I'm thankful, for having made a tremendous difference in this country. I've made a tremendous difference in the country. This country is so much stronger now than it was when I took office that you wouldn't believe it. I mean, you see, but so much stronger people can't even believe it. When I see foreign leaders, they say we cannot believe the difference in strength between the United States now and the United States 2 years ago. To date, he had eased restrictions on loan sharks passed gigantic, regressive tax cuts designed to allow CEOs and shareholders to pay a lower rate on their passive income than workers did on their wages. Exploded the deficit. Sabotaged Obamacare. Put a man on the Supreme Court who claimed accusations of sexual assault against him were engineered as revenge on behalf of the Clintons, and another who said it should be legal to fire a trucker for abandoning his broken down truck to get help rather than freezing to alienated foreign allies while cozying up to murderous autocrats. Dragged the U.S. into a self-defeating trade war with China that caused layoffs and losses at American companies and was paid for by American taxpayers. Use the armed forces for a $200 million election stunt. Proposed a plan to let coal plants regulate themselves that would kill up to 1,400 Americans annually. Presided over a 17% rise in hate crimes in the year prior, including a 37% increase in anti-Semitic hate crimes. Let Puerto Rico implode and smeared its dead. Ceded any moral high ground whatsoever when it came to condemning human rights abuses, not that he'd ever do anything like that, by letting his Saudi pals get away with resident / government tells furloughed workers to unclog toilets for rent as Trump rants and raves over border. December 28, 2018. In December 2018, presidential man-child Donald Trump shut down the government for 35 days because lawmakers wouldn't give him $5 million for his wall. In that time, some 800,000 federal workers went unpaid, leaving those living paycheck to paycheck with very real concerns about having money for food and housing. So the Trump administration came up with some suggestions, which included but were not limited to trading janitorial services for rent, taking out a loan, and approaching the whole thing like an unpaid vic. Jared Kushner, blackmail and witness tampering are family matters. January 15, 2019. To understand why the Trump administration was such an epic disaster, you need to know that Trump handled the transition more or less by himself, and having no relevant experience whatsoever, did an extremely bad job. It didn't have to be this way, though. Chris Christie, a comparatively competent manager who had served as both a federal prosecutor and in an executive role, was originally handling the whole thing, but apparently Jared Kushner convinced Trump and, according to Christie, Kushner did that because years prior, Christie had prosecuted Kushner's dad for illegal campaign contributions, tax evasion, and witness tampering. The witness tampering charge, to which Charles Kushner pleaded guilty, particularly rankled young Jared because even though Kushner the elder admitted to retaliating against his sister's husband, William Shielder, who was cooperating with the feds, by hiring a sex worker to seduce him, filming the encounter, and sending the tape to his sister, Kushner thought such things were family matters, to be handled by and then America got to pay for this unique interpretation of the law! Trump can't stop, won't stop, taking dictators' words for it. February 28, 2019. The president loved to side with authoritarians over his own intelligence agencies. In this case, he told reporters that while everyone else believed North Korea was responsible for the death of Otto Warmbier, the American student imprisoned in the country for more than a year who died days after being sent back with brain damage, he spoke to Kim Jong-un about it and decided the brutal dictator didn't deserve any of the blame. He felt badly about it, Trump said of the world's foremost human rights abusers, who has also had members of his own family killed. Trump's comments didn't go over great stateside, but of course, this wasn't the first time he sided with a maniacal despot over officials from his own country. The previous July, He told reporters in Helsinki that he believed Vladimir Putin when the Russian president said the Kremlin did not interfere in the 2016 election, and several months later he explained that while it certainly looked like Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman had Door's resident Jamal Khashoggi via Bonesaw, he'd spoken to MBS on the phone, and the guy totally denied any knowledge of what took place, which was good enough for Trump. Certified moron Donald Trump thinks wind turbines cause cancer. April 3, 2019. They say the noise causes cancer, Trump claimed of wind turbines during a fundraiser in D.C. If you have a windmill anywhere near your house, congratulations, your house just went down 75% in value. Trump asks his lawyer to look into buying Greenland. April 15, 2019. And then when he was told no, he threw a fit and cancelled a trip to Denmark because the Prime Minister was mean to him and said he couldn't buy an autonomous car. Mueller confirms, Don Jr. was too stupid to collude. April 18, 2019. Did the president's eldest son set up the infamous Trump Tower meeting in June 2016 with Jared Kushner, then campaign manager Paul Manafort, a trio of Russians, and a translator after having been promised dirt on Hillary Clinton? Did he make a big show of telling everyone the Russians were coming, announcing it in the regular morning meeting of senior campaign staff and Trump family members, saying he had a lead on negative information about the Clinton Foundation that he was taking a meeting to investigate? Yes. Was the whole thing so sketchy that the special counsel's office considered whether to charge Trump campaign officials with crimes in connection with the June 9 meeting? Also yes. Nevertheless, Don Jr. ended up getting off scot-free not because he hadn't done anything wrong, but because Mueller concluded he was too stupid to know what he was doing, a stupidity that was memorialized in the Russia report, with Mueller writing, "The office determined that the government would not be likely to obtain and sustain a conviction, because, the office did not obtain admissible evidence likely to meet the government's burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that these individuals i.e., with general knowledge of the illegality of their conduct." Later, Don Jr. did a victory dance about the news that he was too dumb to be charged. Trump demands apology from congresswomen he told to go back to third world hellholes. July 15, 2019. After attacking freshman congresswomen Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, and Rashida Tlaib, falsely claiming that all four women originally came from countries whose governments are a complete and total catastrophe, and telling them to go back and help fix the totally broken and crime-infested places from which they came, Trump demanded the four women say sorry to America, tweeting, "When will the radical left congresswomen apologize to our country, the people of Israel, and even to the office of the president, for the fouling?" Ivanka Trump, "Let's focus on the shootings my dad isn't responsible for." August 6, 2019. The first daughter really didn't like it when people blamed her father for a mass shooting in El Paso by a perpetrator who wrote of an immigrant invasion, having stoked violence through his racist, anti-immigrant, misogynist rhetoric, which literally included lamenting that the government couldn't stop migrants from crossing the border. Trump displays doctored hurricane map to hit Alabama, cover his own ass. September 4, 2019. Hey, remember when the President of the United States claimed a hurricane was going to hit Alabama, even though the government's own forecasters never predicted such a thing, and after it failed to do so he used what looks to be a Sharpie to doctor a map in an attempt to claim he wasn't the only one warning the state was going to get hit hard, even though he was? And then it came out that scientists and meteorologists were told not to correct. Is this real? Trump sends third grade reading level letter to Erdogan. October 16, 2019. Days after greenlighting an invasion by Turkey into northern Syria, Trump apparently sort of changed his mind, which maybe had something to do with the House overwhelmingly voting to condemn his troop withdrawal from the area, and sent this letter to a world leader. Dear Mr. President, let's work out a good deal. You don't want to be responsible for slaughtering thousands of people, And I don't want to be responsible for destroying the Turkish economy, and I will. I've already given you a little sample with respect to Pastor Brunson. I have worked hard to solve some of your problems. Don't let the world down. You can make a great deal. General Mazloum is willing to negotiate with you, and he is willing to make concessions that they would never have made in the past. I am confidentially enclosing a copy of his letter to me, just received. History will look upon you favorably if you get this done the right and humane. It will look upon you forever as a devil if good things don't happen. Don't be a tough guy, don't be a fool. I will call you later. Sincerely. Donald Trump. According to reports, Erdogan promptly threw the letter in the trash. Trump leans into corruption, decides to host G7 at Trump-Doral. October 17, 2019. In the midst of an escalating impeachment inquiry, Trump said FK it and announced that the next G7 summit, an event drawing hundreds of diplomats, security personnel, and reporters, would be held at his for-profit Miami Golf Resort. Later, he tweeted that the White House had decided to look for another venue, based on the media and Democrat-crazed and irrational hostility he'd received in response to the news. According to his then-Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney, Trump was honestly surprised at the level of pushback. Trump boldly and insanely claims Ivanka created 14 million jobs. November 12, 2019. Two of the most dominant features of the failed human experiment known as Donald Trump, his pathological inability to tell the truth, and his creepy obsession with his eldest daughter. On November 12, 2019, those two attributes collided when the president claimed that Ivanka has personally created 14 million jobs during her time in Washington, despite the fact that total U.S. employment has only grown by roughly 6 million in the last 3 years. 14 million and going up, he said. Trump goes full anti-Semite in a room full of Jewish people. December 9, 2019. A few days later, his White House Hanukkah party featured a pastor who once said, "Not only do religions like Mormonism, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, not only do they lead people away from the true God, they lead people to an eternity of separation." You know, Jesus was very clear. Hell is not only going to be populated by murderers and drug dealers and child abusers. Hell is going to be filled with good religious people who have rejected the truth of Christ. Trump claims coronavirus will miraculously go away by April. February 11, 2020. It did not go away by April. Stock markets crash as Trump insists coronavirus fears are fake news. March 9, 2020. The Dow Jones dropped more than 1,800 points at the open while the S&P 500 fell more than 7%. A massive sell-off that triggered a circuit breaker and halted trading for 15 minutes. Meanwhile, Trump was still insisting this coronavirus business was much ado about nothing, although we now know that a month prior, he'd told Bob Woodward, "You just breathe the air and that's how it's passed." And so that's a very tricky one. That's a very delicate one. It's also more deadly than even your strenuous flu. Great news. Jared Kushner doesn't think the coronavirus is a health reality. March 13, 2020. It was not great news. Particularly given Boy Wonder's decision to take on a more expansive role for himself despite his lack of knowledge on the topic, and to do so without talking to most of the task force members or public health. On the other hand, he did consult Karlie Kloss's father, who conferred with a Facebook group and got back to Jared. Trump uses coronavirus press conference to confirm he's an actual sociopath. March 20, 2020. During a press conference at the White House, NBC reporter Peter Alexander asked Trump, "What do you say to the Americans who are scared, though? Nearly 200 dead, 14,000 who are sick, millions, as you've witnessed, who are scared right now. What do you say to Americans who are watching you right now who are scared?" It was a softball question that anyone with a semblance of a soul could have answered with something like, "That's an understandable." I would tell them we're in this together and we're doing everything we can, as fast as we can. Instead, Trump told Alexander, I say that you're a terrible reporter. That's what I say. I think it's a very nasty question, and I think it's a very bad signal that you're putting out to the American people. The American people are looking for answers and they're looking for hope, and you're doing sensationalism, and the same with NBC and Comcast. I don't call it Comcast, I call it Concast. Let me just tell you something. That's really bad reporting, and you ought to get back to reporting instead of sensationalism. Lysol manufacturer warns Trump is a dangerous moron. Under no circumstance should disinfectant be injected in body. April 24, 2020. This is a thing that actually had to be said after Trump, upon hearing that research had shown bleach and isopropyl alcohol could kill the virus, mused, the disinfectant knocks it out in a minute. 1 minute. Is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside? It would be, he mused, almost a cleaning. It gets in the lungs and does a tremendous number on the lungs, adding it'd be interesting to check that. So you're going to have to use medical doctors, but it sounds interesting to me. Trump 2 weeks away from claiming he saw Biden selling drugs outside the Washington Monument. September 11, 2020. In the weeks leading up to the first presidential debate, Trump started claiming that Biden was using performance-enhancing drugs, demanding that his opponent pee in a cup before they took to the yes, people reading this in the year 2121, that actually happened! Donald Trump, worst person on earth, says Ruth Bader Ginsburg's dying wish is a Democratic. September 21, 2020. Did Ruth Bader Ginsburg really say, as dictated to and reported by her granddaughter, "My most fervent wish is that I will not be replaced until a new president is installed"? Donald Trump, human parasite, wasn't. I don't know that she said that, or was that written out by Adam Schiff and Schumer and Pelosi, he told Fox just days after RBG died. I would be more inclined to the second, but that sounds like a Schumer deal or maybe a Pelosi or Shifty Schiff. Steroid-induced psychosis, Donald Trump follows up Sunday night joyride with extra crazy Monday, even for him. Donald Trump were my patient, I'd call security to restrain him then. October 5, 2020. The president followed up a weekend in which he forced Secret Service agents to drive his COVID-19 riddled body around the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center by making people extra worried about his mental state, which, at its baseline, is rabies-addled raccoon. If it real Donald Trump were my patient, I'd call security to restrain him then perform a psychiatric evaluation to examine his decision-making capacity. One doctor. Sounds like steroid-induced psychosis is setting in, said another. Not for the first time, concerns were raised about him having access to the nuclear codes. Trump insists it's entirely possible Democrats are running a satanic pedophile cult. October 16, 2020. This was Trump's big pitch to the American people in the run-up to the election. Report: Jared Kushner an even bigger idiot than previously thought, and yes, that's saying something. October 28, 2020. Thanks to the recordings made by Bob Woodward while he was researching his second book on the Trump administration, we know that the first son-in-law bragged that he was taking the country back from the doctors at the height of the pandemic, and believed that this was at the start of its comeback in April. Oops, Jared. Swing and a miss. Donald Trump, colossal asshole, says doctors get extra cash if people die of COVID-19. October 30, 2020. You know, in Germany, he told a crowd in Waterford Township, Michigan, if you have a bad heart and you're ready to die, or if you have cancer and you're going to be dying soon, and you catch COVID, that happens, you know, our doctors get more money if somebody dies from COVID. You know that, right? I mean, our doctors are very smart people. In Germany and other places, if you have a heart attack or you have cancer, you're terminally ill, you catch COVID, they say you died of cancer, you died of a heart attack. With us, when in doubt, choose COVID. It's true. No, it's true. No, They'll say, "Oh, it's terrible what he said, but it's true. It's, like, $2,000 more. So you get more money. This could only happen to us." Trump insists he's still going to be president as White House landlord asks for forwarding address for security deposit. November 24, 2020. The transition was officially underway, and Trump was online retweeting an image saying, "I concede nothing." Donald Trump hits feces-flinging stage of election fraud fight. December 22, 2020. On day 46 of the Donald Trump attempts to overthrow democracy show, the president continued to refuse to accept the results of the 2020 election, despite zero evidence of voter fraud and having been humiliated in court dozens of times. According to contemporaneous reports, he believed everyone around him was weak, stupid, or disloyal. Top officials desperately tried to avoid the West Wing, where Trump was lashing out and everyone was in the blast zone. Anyone not in the Department of Homeland Security or the military to impound voting machines camp was dead to him. Donald Trump, dealmaker-in-chief, turned down multiple offers to buy more Pfizer vaccine. December 8, 2020. This one didn't turn out to be a great idea. More on that later. Trump unleashes fascist mob on Capitol Hill to overthrow democracy. January 6, 2021. Days after he unsuccessfully pressured a Georgia election official to find him 11,780 votes, the President of the United States whipped his supporters into a violent frenzy, inciting them to lay siege on Capitol Hill in an attempt to block the certification of Biden's win and possibly declare as they attacked the building, and lawmakers went into hiding. Trump and Giuliani called a lawmaker and tried to convince him to delay the counting of the Electoral College votes. While trying to reach Senator Tommy Tuberville, the dynamic duo accidentally called Mike Lee. Ivanka, Eric, and Don Jr. are in furious damage control mode following Capitol Hill siege. January 6, 2021. The president's adult children would like it to be known that when they threatened lawmakers and called the violent mob American patriots, they didn't mean it in the sense that makes them culpable for the riot or results in their shunning by polite society. Hope Hicks is resigning from the White House, but not because people broke into the Capitol and smeared tea through the halls, which she's fine with. January 8, 2021. Like many Trump administration officials, Hicks, or Hopi, as Trump called her, decided to cut her time in the White House a little short. But unlike other people, who put out statements saying the insurrection incited by Trump was the cause, Hicks wanted to make it clear her departure had nothing to do with the violent riot, or Trump's followers smearing shit through the halls, and that she was not taking. Melania Trump, has no one stopped to think how the Capitol Hill attack affected me? January 11, 2021. After 5 days of silence surrounding the violent attack on Capitol Hill, First Lady Melania Trump issued a statement saying she was disappointed and disheartened with what happened last week, though she wasn't talking about her husband inciting a violence. She was talking about unwarranted personal attacks against her from people who are looking to be relevant and have an agenda. If we didn't know better, we'd have thought Donald Trump wrote it himself, but there was no mention of the election having been stolen from him, so apparently this was all Melania. Trump thought he could convince Pence to overthrow the election by calling him a pussy. January 13, 2021. When that didn't work out, he turned to Plan B, incite an angry mob that wanted to kill the P. Report. Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner made their Secret Service detail go to extreme lengths to find a bathroom. January 14, 2021. Centuries from now, it's important that history students are taught that the first daughter and her husband refused to let the Secret Service agents guarding their lives use any of their 5 toilets, forcing the security detail to use the Obama's bathroom, Pence's bathroom, and the bathrooms of local businesses, until they ultimately rented an apartment across the street for access to its toilet, costing taxpayers more than $100,000. The Trump administration was just kidding when it said it had tons more vaccine doses to ship out. It has zero. January 15, 2021. Stop us if you've heard this hilarious gag before. Mitch McConnell, Senate ghoul, will let Trump finish his full term after being impeached. January 14, 2021. In the end, Trump was not forcibly removed from the White House despite posing a clear and present danger to society, but he was the first president in history to be impeached. He may also become the first president to both actually be convicted by the Senate and perhaps a court of law. Also the first one to kill 400,000 people and, separately, incite an act of sedition. Can't forget that.